remember the way that we structured the biblical narrative, in terms of time periods that are revealed there. If you look at the whole process, which is described as history from the book of Genesis to the 1st century AD with Jesus Christ and apostles, there are pretty evident divisions of time, and we structured, or we named 4 of them. So the first one being before the flood, creation till the flood, right? 1,656 years, and we took one figure from that period of time, who was Noah, and surprisingly, his life, was so much interesting that I hear people still talking about it, about some of the interesting facts that we learned, while dealt with him, while we were studying him. Then the second period we called a patriarchal period, right? It's basically from the flood till the time when Israelites were freed from the slavery and they formed their own state. And it's a different set of circumstances, different mode of society. And we took one person from that period, and it was Joseph. So between the flood and the monarchy and establishment of the state of Israel. And now we are in our third period of time, which is monarchy itself. A theocratic model, which means that God is the ruler and he rules through his laws and through his representatives, specifically through priests and prophets. And so the person that I chose from this third time slot is, of course, Daniel. Yeah. So let's open the book of Daniel, and we would work with the first chapter today. We'll read, verses one by one, as we usually do, and it will be mostly from the book of Daniel, but we'll, use some other scriptures as well. So, the book of Daniel, chapter 1, and let's read first 3 verses. Are you ready?
Yep.
You could use any language you want, or any version that you prefer. Okay, Daniel chapter 1, first 3 verses.
In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and decided.
And the Lord gave Jehoiakim king of Judah into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the articles into the treasure house of his God.
И сказал царь Асфеназу, начальнику евнуха своих, чтобы он из сынов Израилевых, из рода царского и княжеского привел.
That's it.
You should have finished the...
That's an odd way to finish. Well, anyhow.
This is the way it is.
Yeah. It's not your fault. It's the one who broke the text.
Yeah.
By the way, do you know that originally there were no chapters or
verses,
text or verses rather, yeah. And sometimes when you look at the beginning and at the end of each verse, you wonder, how in the world they came up with this division. And and the story goes like this. Of course, it's a myth from what I gathered, but still, the way to divide biblical text into verses was that a person was holding a manuscript, riding on his horse, and holding a. They didn't have pen at that time, but equivalent to pen. and you know, when the horse, you know, gallops, it makes you up and down. So he would hold, you know, his whatever stick or whatever, and just move it little by little. So whenever the horse was doing like this, and based on the terrain, you know, some verses are this long, some verses are like the smallest one is well, in Russian, не убивай. No, не кради, you should not steal.
Must be going really fast then.
Не убивай, не переводись, не кради. Well, anyhow, it's a useful thing to remember that when reading the Bible, the breakage of the text sometimes suggests the unit of thought, and oftentimes it's not. So yeah, usually we need to look at the broader picture. But anyhow, we do have enough material to work with, even with the way the third verse, you know, ends. So what do you see about Daniel? What do you learn about Daniel in these verses that we have already read? Let me be more specific and help you. What was his lineage? What was his family? Jewish. First of
Royalty.
all. Huh?
Royalty.
Royalty
Or noble.
or the nobility, it says. It says from kings and princes, right? The King James Version says of the king's seed, meaning descendants of kings, and of princes. And some versions have royal and nobility. I think NIV has a royal and nobility. So Daniel was from the so-called upper society, the 1% of the population, as it referred to often today. What is generally believed to be true about those people? I mean, if you are one of them, just share. What's life is like, you know, like Ilya was referring to, right? Everybody is rich and so forth. So, what is generally assumed about kids who are born and raised in this wealthy?
Lazy, spoiled.
But I guess we're probably more educated than rest of the guys.
That's also true.
Okay, like
Because you can actually pay, your tuition for your education.
I noticed that like the more like the rich people are, like I have a couple of my friends, they're like doctors, like make millions of dollars, and the way they talk, the way they communicate, the way they associate themselves with crowds, they have like their own kind of niche about it, like their own highest standard. Yeah. And the way they present themselves, anything like that, it's like they have their own set of rules, I guess, that like rich people have, and it's different.
It's like a culture.
It is. It's like its own culture.
There's a word for it in English, but I forgot. Just when you feel like you deserve something just out of nowhere, like you're on from the world, when you really aren't. But I feel like some rich people are like that. At least that's the assumption that people have about that.
Yeah, and of course, this is the exact question I'm asking. What is generally believed about that kind of people? Because of course, we could talk about generality of things, about average, but within any kind of average situation, there are particulars and exclusions from the rule and so forth. But still, it is very easy to live your life very relaxed and be prone to many sins that general people just don't have time for. When you are not required to make your living, then and you have a ton of free time, on your hands, it's in itself a very dangerous predicament. You tend to, unfortunately, that's the nature of human race. You tend to just do some very unproductive things. So Daniel was from royal family, from the lineage of princes, and you know, so it's we could generally assume, based on the knowledge that we have about those people who are rich and in the upper society today, that he would not be the likely candidate to stay firm in his beliefs. So what do we see here? Those young people are taken away from their society, from their culture, and brought as slaves into Babylon. They are taken away from their families, from their historic roots, from their faith, from their temple, from anything that's familiar and represented their way of life. So they're in a very foreign and then hostile towards God and His principles environment now. So picture a person who is transplanted to a totally different environment. Okay, let's go to verse. Another important thing. What's the eunuch?
It's like a person who's been castrated.
Exactly. Verse number 3 says, "And the king spake unto Aspenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes." So the person was, because Aspenaz was the master of the eunuchs of the king, then we need to ask the question: did Daniel become a eunuch? Was he castrated when he was brought to Jerusalem? To Babylon. And there is a prophecy about this. If you could open 2 Kings, chapter 20, verses 16 through 18. 2 Kings, chapter 20, verses 16 through 18. If possible, let's go on reading. So Alex was the last one. 2 Kings, chapter 20, verses 16 through 18, and please read verses one by one as we did before. Bogdan, it's your turn.
That's first Kings.
2 Kings 20, verse 16.
16. И сказал Исаия Изаки, выслушай слово Господне.
It was a easy. He's 17.
More? Okay.
No. It's one by one.
Right, son?
У тебя будет четвертое.
Что это? No.
It's 2 Kings or
Четвертое
царство.
царство. Because it goes first Samuel, second Samuel, then first Kings.
И вот придут дни, и взято будет все, что в доме твоем, и что собрали отцы твои до сего дня, и Вавилон ничего не останется, говорит Господь.
And they shall take away some of your sons who will descend from you, whom you will beget, and they shall be eunuchs in this palace, in the palace of the king of Babylon.
Okay, thank you. So it's pretty clear that the prophecy states that descendants of the king will become eunuchs. And the term eunuch means a castrated person. Guys, can you imagine this?
That's basically the end of their lineage, of their royal lineage.
Yeah. That's was one of the reasons, the Babylonian and Assyrian kings did that. They so to speak, they took away the cream of the crop, right, and castrated them so that there is no hope for future restoration of the kingdom. That's the strategy. It would, from the look of on your faces, I could gather that it's difficult to imagine because you haven't gone through the experience, right? But let's try to imagine. Like, do you guys have hopes for finding that pretty girl that will become your wife, and also the smart one and the kind one, right? And then loving her, in all the manner that's described in the Bible, in the book of Songs of Solomon, and unexpectedly, nothing is available. So it must have been a very terrible experience, right?
Psychologically damaging, probably.
Thank God, we are not facing this kind of predicament today. Well, who knows? But from what we know right now. So it's a huge stress being taken as a slave and then castrated, and then in foreign environment. It's something that could break most of the people. Any questions so far?
Well, did it go against any laws in the Bible?
To be castrated?
Yeah.
Of course. Because in order to fulfill the first commandment, be fruitful and multiply, you kind of need those. But
They didn't really have a choice.
yeah.
Does Paul, when he writes in 1 Corinthians
that's what I
chapter
was
7,
thinking
when he
about.
writes about marriage and says that it's not for a man to not touch a woman, and it's like, personally he writes, myself, that it's better for a man to not be married than it is. So when Paul writes about that, is he kind of going against that being fruitful and multiply, or is he writing more in a spiritual perspective?
He says, but everyone has his or her own gift.
Yeah.
So, and then he basically reiterates the words of Jesus, and it's in Matthew 19, and Jesus says that some are born being castrated, some are made by men to be such. So, bearing in mind that sin has entered the world and abnormalities happen, Paul just stresses the fact that there are some people who just naturally don't have this desire to create family. And if a person has this gift, then he just recognizes that some people don't need a family because they are not inclined to it. But he says this is just I'm one of those. He says. Well, I would state it like that. At least at that time, he was like that. He was not, in a marital relationship. But so it is happening now, which was not God's original plan. As many things, which became, an order today, an order of life, but were not meant originally. So you kind of have to bear in mind both the original plan and the circumstances that we live in, and deal with the best you can. Christina.
There's obviously so much about sexuality articles and books and everything online right now. There's this term asexual, which means the person is not attracted to any sex. And people say, oh, that's made up, teenagers just make stuff up now, because there's so many of sexualities these days. And that's funny, Paul was asexual in that term. That if that's what he said, he wasn't attracted to any sex.
Yep.
But that's just funny to me.
Yeah, well, yeah. Life is very complex, those people who have a simplistic view of life and of human nature, they tend to be dogmatic and oftentimes condemning and so forth. But when you are trying to be objective, yes, it is a fact, and Jesus testified to it that being not interested in any kind of marital relationships or sexual relationships for that matter is a phenomenon that's just there, exists.
I also have a small question. In the first 3 verses that we read about Daniel taking siege by King Nebuchadnezzar, was that in like the first kind of attempt to siege Jerusalem? Because there's like 606 BC, then 597 and 586.
It's the first. It's 605.
605, yeah.
The first time they took, the best of the people, the rulers, descendants of rulers. They what's the term? Plundered the treasures of the temple and otherwise, but they did nothing else. They basically established their rule, and then in 586 they came again, and then the last one was 11 years later. So this is the first of those. It's 605.
Okay.
It's 605. Okay. Let's go further. Verse number 4. Daniel 1.
You read that one?
It's
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Sigi, okay. Daniel 1 4.
Young men in whom there was no physical defect, and who were handsome, well versed, and in all kinds of wisdom, well educated, and having keen insight, and who were capable of entering the king's royal service, and to teach them the literature and language of the Babylonians.
Thank you. So what was the age of Daniel? Youth. Some versions have teenager. It is generally believed that he was about 17, 18 years of age.
And he became eunuch.
At the peak of his.
Yeah. It did spare him a lot of temptations. That's the problem. Yeah. Still, it's a tragedy. It is a tragedy. So, 17, 18 years of age, or maybe less, we don't know, but generally speaking, he was a teenager, youth age. Then, what else do we know about him from
He
this
was
verse?
smart and beautiful and everything good.
Wise.
Why why it is not permissible to say that young man is pretty?
I don't know.
He should be handsome, not
Well,
pretty.
because it's like feminine, supposedly.
Okay. So he was physically attractive, and he was smart. Without defect.
Там
You know.
Шрам,
Yes, and then also his intellectual capacities
Yes.
are described, and there are 3 ways of describing it. Could you specify what are the ways that his intellect is described, or his capacities in terms of
He
intellect?
possesses knowledge and he's able to understand, so he's able to grasp knowledge.
So he already was educated, right? He already had some knowledge. Then he was quick to learn, and then there is a third one.
Can learn their language?
He might teach the language and then
Wise and sexually.
He could teach others.
Really?
Or are we talking about serving the king's purpose? He's gifted all wisdom.
So it says, well, the King James Version has a skillful in all wisdom, cunning in knowledge, and understanding science. So at least there are 3 descriptions, right? So it tells us that he already, knew, he had some education.
Finished his
So
high school. 17
he
years old.
first 2 years he went to public college, and then his 3rd year he went to
Babylon.
You finish trying to start.
Okay.
That's like going from Southern or like PSA to UW.
Really?
Or like Newski, you know, like
From
from Christian.
Настя.
What's worse?
You are in a very dangerous situation.
I had no intention.
You see, we're trying to make everything very practical and applicable. So, okay. And now, starting with this verse, the Bible describes us the strategy that the king had to assimilate those Jewish boys. So what is the first strategy that was used based on this verse?
Can you repeat that again?
What is the strategy? There is a number of strategies in this text, in this chapter, that shows what the king did to try to assimilate Jewish people into Babylonian culture and religion and the way of life and so forth. So what is the first thing?
In the language?
Learn the language and
Books, literature.
books and literature. So he wanted to give them education of the Babylonians. And what that means, it says that the language, you say, what was the language that they spoke in Babylonian Empire?
Chaldean?
Huh?
Wouldn't it be like an aspect of like Assyrian? From an Assyrian?
It's an Aramaic.
Aramaic.
Aramaic was the language of the people. What was the Chaldean language used for? If you look at chapter 2, let's look at chapter 2, verse. Remember when the king has his dreams rather, and then verse number 2. Let's read number 2 first. Dmitry, chapter 2, verse 2.
Okay. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king.
Thank you. We have a number of categories here, right? Magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. So it was a caste. It was a special group that used special holy language, known only to the ones initiated into that society. So it's not just another language, it's a sacred language, and sacred in terms of heathen understanding, in terms of Gentiles understanding. It was part of their religion. So it's a sacred language to use in the sacred service of pagan gods. And then verse number 4, Karina, chapter 2.
In my verse, it just said wise men.
Yeah, it's New English translation.
А еще вот
New, new,
написано астрономеры, или как это?
У меня в King James то же самое стоит. Халдейский язык.
But you see, Chaldeans is a separate group. Okay, Karina, chapter 2, verse 4.
Then the Chaldean said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will show them interpretation.
Okay. So you see, there is a difference between Chaldean language and the Aramaic language, which was the language of the people. So then let's go back to verse number 4 of the first chapter. The idea was not only to teach them the language of the country, but also the books and the language of Chaldeans, meaning the language for sorcery, for magic, for ministering in those Gentile temples. And the word Chaldean is very interesting, and it's a blessing that that you know Russian, because in English it doesn't sound as clear. So Chaldean in the original here, in Hebrew, is Kaldu.
No, Khaldun.
Sound similar? Kaldu. Khaldun. Khaldun in Russian means a
Wizard, something like that.
sorcerer, something like that. So yeah. First strategy was to immerse them in a foreign education and specifically make them part of their religion. That was the purpose. When you go to state university or state college and try to hold to your Christian beliefs in terms of creation versus evolution, and many other, the way to look at history, archaeological data, paleontological data, and so forth. It is always a challenge, right? Can any of you share, those who have experience of going into public school system versus, those who go into Christian schools and so forth? Can you share your experience of how is it when you learn biology and all of the science basically from an evolutionist perspective? How do you deal with it?
I took a whole class on evolution, and definitely I started doubting things. I'm like, this totally makes sense. Am I stupid? Why is this making sense? And it was maybe 4 years ago. But yeah, and then I feel like and then I took lots of geology classes, and obviously geology, it's all about the age of the earth and everything, how the way moves. And then I had to do research in because I didn't know how I didn't know exactly what we believe as far as Pangea was really split, and did we really have the earth moving and all of that. So I had to do extra research from the Bible point of view to understand it. So it was just double homework for me, really. Because I wanted to understand it from the other point of view. But yeah, it definitely very doubtful. And last time we also talked about it with Noah when they had the people who stepped away from God. They were better at science, better at culture, better at arts. I feel like I was telling Anya the same thing here happening right now. So once again, when I read some books or when I do some research on anything, it always makes me doubt the Bible, which it's not a bad thing, I suppose. But yeah, I can understand when he was there. If I was there, I'd probably be like, okay, that's it. Become a Chaldea or something. But yeah, you have to be really, really strong to stay true to your religion. I understand that.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody else?
I think so. I'm a biology major, and there's a lot of too many courses of cover evolution and everything like that. And I've seen my friends that are Baptists and Pentecostal that at first believed in the 7 literal days of creation, and then after the end of the semester when we were talking about certain types of creations, and there was we had a debate at school of Christian versus atheists, and they're talking about certain archaeological data and how everything COVID-14 dating and everything like that. And after that, we were talking to them. I was talking to them, and they were like, "Well, God created in 7 days, but they weren't literal 7 days, And I feel like that's what a lot of people believe now, or Christians believe.
That's majority.
So, and it really changes, and that's one of the reasons why I went to Adventist school, because I wanted to get a different perspective of how to Adventist teaching. And we still go over in my biology class, we still go over evolutionary aspects of it, but we also go through creationist aspects of and how why are we connected, DNA and everything like that. So.
When I went to school, when they were talking to us kids, how everything was there. So they gave two things. So one perspective is that God created everything because we're kind of Christian nation, Ukraine, Russia. Yeah. Well, I was born in USSR, but then I was raised in Christian kind of. Yeah. So they were giving 2 options. So it was normal because they taught us stories from Bible and how Bible teaches, and then they also give the evolutionist perspective. And then when I came here, and then I took biology classes, and then people freely talk Like, yeah, well, it's the only option.
Yeah.
And then they so sure about it that everything was explosion and then billions of years. So they don't even give a chance for people to think differently. So and I was surprised how old students who sit there and they're like, yeah, probably, not a problem. And then it was a big thing for me. I was like, you serious, kids?
Yeah. So we could imagine vividly the kind of pressure that was put, on Daniel at this very young age to face this, totally different worldview. And we need to understand that Babylonians were the science men of the time. They developed science. They, had astronomy figured out pretty well, mathematics, many things they were kind of like a leading country in terms of science at that time. So I'm sure they had their data and their information figured out to justify whatever they believe. So first strategy is to get a secular. It wasn't secular in the literal sense of the term, but it was not a biblical education or Bible-based education or God-based education. It was a totally different mindset. That's the first strategy that was used. Can we go on? Okay, verse number 5.
The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after they were to enter the king's service.
What's the second strategy for assimilating them?
Food.
Food.
Greatest weakness.
Preach it.
So eat whatever the king eats and drink whatever the king drinks. So basically change your diet and accept the Babylonian diet, which of course was not following the Leviticus 18 model, right? Clean, unclean, and so forth. Food has a very profound way of influencing us. And sometimes we don't realize that. But the Bible says in Leviticus chapter 11 that God gave these dietary laws to us in order for us to become sanctified. So the food actually sanctifies us. And to sanctify means to separate, to set apart, right? And if a person follows God's laws, then he or she forms a habit of choosing. Because each time you eat something, you choose whether to eat the way God asks you or otherwise. And when you take this aspect out of your life, the one that always reminds you about the rules, so to speak, about the separation of good and evil, of sanctified, holy and unholy, then it is much easier to get sucked into other kinds of breaking of God's commandments. So food is very basic to us. There is a story about a Jewish boy who went to get his education outside of home, and 1 year passed by, and then he came back, and they're having a dinner, and of course before the food they do the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai, and so forth, and blessed be the Lord our God who gives us food and so forth. And they notice that he doesn't have his yarmulke. You know what yarmulke is? Kippah in funny hat, as they call it, the circle hat. And mother goes like, so why aren't you wearing your yarmulke? Because to pronounce a blessing, it is customary for Jewish people to have yarmulke. It's funny when we were in Jerusalem as part of the Holy Land tour, we saw some people in the restaurant just using a napkin and placing it, over their heads while reciting the blessing. Because something needs to cover you when you are addressing God. And the idea is that when you have this cover on, you submit to God's authority. You show that there is something above you. That's the basic idea. Well, anyhow, the mother says, "So why aren't you wearing yarmulke?" And he says, "Mom, I would look very, weird in the dorm, wearing this kind of, hat and funny hat." So at first I tried, but then, they would give me the looks and so forth. So I just, throughout this year, I just stopped wearing the yarmulke. Well, okay. Then sensing, the trouble, mother says, "Are you still eating have you been eating kosher?" And he says, the restaurant or whatever, the food venues around, they don't offer kosher. So to do that, I need to drive to another part of the town, and then I need to cook for myself, and so I just don't have time for that. So I stopped eating kosher. At first I tried not to eat it with shrimps and pork, but anyhow, on a protein level, it's all the same. So I just stopped eating kosher. And then she asked the final question, "My son, are you still circumcised?" As our local Russian rabbi says, one of the advantages of a circumcision is that you can't undo it. So it stays with you forever. So another pressure, food. It's a very powerful instrument of assimilating into a different culture. Verse number 6. Another strategy. Anna.
Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah.
Thank you. To be able to read it without stumbling, it's rare. This, you do know that all the Hebrew names, and for that matter, all the names in the Bible, they bear meaning, right? And when God's people were choosing the names for their children, they would do it out of the meaning. First of all, out of the meaning of the name. So let's go over the meaning of the names. Daniel, what's the meaning of your name? Sorry for picking on you. Anna should know, right? Because you are very closely related. Karina, do you know? You are even closer. Okay, anybody knows what Daniel means?
Judge of God.
Yeah, judge of God, or God is my judge. Dan is to judge, the verb judge, and then El is Lord. So you could structure it differently. God is my judge, or judging God would be kind of, yeah. So the name has God's name in it, right? What is Hananiah? Whenever you see Yah, it's Yahweh, it's Jehovah. So Hananiah means mercy of Jehovah, or Jehovah's mercy, or Yahweh's mercy. Then Mishael.
Who's like God?
Yeah, it's easy. Who is like God? And then Azariah. Okay.
Yahweh.
You have Yahweh here, and if you remember, there was a stone, Aven Ezer. What does it mean? at one point of biblical history. Till this place, God has helped us. Yeah. So Azariah means Jehovah helps. And anytime you use those names, anytime that you are called by the name, by your name, you are reminded about who you are and who God is, and about the relationships between you and your God and so forth. But when they come to Babylon, and this is another strategy used to assimilate them, the king changes their names. And so Daniel, verse number 7.
But the overseer of the court officials renamed them. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, Hananiah he named Shadrach, Mishael he named Meshach, and Azariah he named Abednego.
So what was the purpose of those different names? And what was the meaning of those names? The Belteshazzar, the name that was given to Daniel, means let Bel, and Oval is the name of Babylonian god, Val, main god. It's a title of Marduk, the main god. It's one of the names of the chief deity of that land. Let Val protect his life. That's the name. So just imagine that in Russian that you are called this way each time that they address you, right? I mean, it's terrible. So the name of a false god is placed upon you, and they call you this name. So it's a way of pressuring. Then what's the second name? Shadrach means it's a decree or will of Aku, and Aku is Sumerian god, Sumerian moon god. Moon was so the will of Aku means that's the meaning of the name. Then we have Meshach, and the name means who is like Aku. You see, it was who is like God, and now who is like Aku. And then the last one is Abednego, is a minister of Nevor. Nevor is another deity. In ancient world, the change of your name signified a change of your status, of your nature. So it was a very significant thing for them. They were called the names of the heathen deities. Okay, so far we have seen 3 strategies. First, education, then food, then names. That's in addition to the fact that they were relocated and castrated and put into a different environment. So what do they do? What does Daniel do? Verse number 8.
Даниил, положив в сердце своем не оскверняться явствами состава царского и вином, какое пьет царь, и потому просил начальника евнухов о том, чтобы не оскверняться ему.
So first of all, Daniel, makes a decision, right? It says that he placed it. How does it? It says Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. So he makes the decision, the internal decision, to stay true to God. And based on that decision, he acts. And what's his action is?
Rejection. Pretty much.
To talk to the guy.
Yeah.
Be like, come on.
He talks to the main official and asks to preserve himself from this food. So he expressed this, the dietary laws of my God, they prohibit me from eating this.
It's actually a good thing that he talked to someone, because if he would make a decision to himself and then just try to keep it, probably he would have a hard times, and sometimes just, and then when he knew that the official knows, he can't. It's a good point.
He makes the decision and then he acts upon it. He tries to solve the problem and he gives the reason. You see the end of the verse 9? 8. He requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. He doesn't say, well, I just don't like the king's food. He doesn't try to hide. What do you do when you are invited to a foreign set of...
I just don't like pork. It's just not good to me.
Yeah, I mean, for the health reasons, or I don't like the taste of it, or I don't feel like eating, meat today. You could use anything to conceal the real issue, but Daniel doesn't do it. He uses the term from the Bible. It says, "I don't want to defile myself." And of course, some people they are doing it arrogantly and very in a condemning way to those who don't know God's laws. And he's not like that. He's asking, but in asking he gives the reason, right? And it's a very simple way of witnessing. Because anytime you get to a place where you don't know what's in there or who isn't there, you just say, and you use this opportunity to witness. So he talks to the main guy, right? To the chief of eunuchs. What's the response? Verse 9.
Then God made the overseer of the court officials sympathetic to Daniel.
This is the first time God acts, in this story. The first God's action is described in verse 2, I believe. Yeah, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, unto his hand, and so forth. So God allowed the captivity to happen, but then God is silent. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't prevent them from being deported, taken as slaves. He doesn't prevent them from being castrated or put into this environment and so forth. God basically waits for the guys' reaction to this set of circumstances. And when there is a decision, and then there is first act to defend God's will and to stay firm, God acts immediately. This verse, God had brought Daniel into favor. The KJV said, King James Version says, now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. So he kind of liked the guy, right? And it wasn't. It was a supernatural thing. Oftentimes when you look at the circumstances, they seem beyond your capacity to change things or to be faithful to God. But if you make the right decision to stay firm and you do whatever you can ask for accommodation of your religious beliefs, right? God begin to act immediately. That's a great lesson to remember. And I do know that you have those experiences as well, right? Anybody wants to share a small part of your life when you made the right decision and you requested for a special accommodation, then things turned around the way that you didn't even expect it.
I have a small one. I was working at Highline in community college in kind of like an advisor position for clubs and like certain events on campus. And there were certain conferences that I had to go that were like statewide conferences, part of my job, and they were like in Venanshi and like Spokane and stuff like that, because I was part of the team in the office, and they were over the weekend. So they were on like Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday, and then Monday, and I told my supervisor, my boss, that on Sunday nights I can't go on Sabbath, and I can't participate in the lectures that are going to be going on through the Sabbath, and I prayed about it, and that was like a month and a half advance before the conference, and then and I asked him like, well, can I take my own car and come to that, and then I can go to church or whatever that they have in the church or something like that, and I wasn't able to take my own car, but God answered my prayer, and I was able to. The church that we stayed in was right next to the Adventist church.
Wow.
And I was able to skip the lectures and go to the church, and then I was able to my Saturday and everything was free. So it was just like, and then Sunday I went back to the lectures. So it was just like, it was a good thing.
Great, thank you.
Alright, I got kind of the same story. Well, it was my first job. I really needed a job, and well, I applied to Lowe's, and I had the interview and everything, and usually on the interview they ask you when you can work. I'm like, so yeah, I can work those days, but beginning of Friday sunset until like Saturday sundown I can work. She's like, okay, sure. And then they hired me, and then after the first week I see my schedule, and they scheduled me to work on Saturday. So I'm like, I come into my HR manager and, hey, so remember on the interview I told you I cannot work those days? She's like, wait, what? Yeah, I told her. She's like, did you really tell me? Like, yeah. And I filled out the form what days I can work and whatever. She's like, really? And she pulled out my application and everything. She's like, oh, well, we actually hired you because we really needed somebody to work on Saturday. But she's like, well, you already told us, so we can't really do anything. So yeah, we'll take out the schedule. And I worked there for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And well, the second job is kind of, I just applied. I was listening, just staying up, couldn't sleep. I was applying, pretty much to like 40 listings of Craigslist. And second job, I came to the interview. Well, pretty much got hired on the same day, and got helped at pretty much Friday and Saturday as well. Well, Friday is, well, I my work at 5, and Saturday is always off. So kind of with all my job history, I was able to get the Saturday and Friday off.
Thank you. So just always remember the principle. When you make the right decision and you just begin acting upon it, God begins to act. And sometimes it's not as flawlessly as in the 2 cases that we just heard, but God still is faithful, and He always finds something that is what you need. Okay, verse number 10.
But he responded, I am afraid of my Lord and the king, who has ordered that you eat this food and wine. If you become pale and thin compared to the other youths your age, I am afraid the king will have me beheaded.
So was that a yes or no answer?
I wish I could help answer. He was like, I wish I could help, but I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah, you see, he wants to help.
He's
right?
sympathetic towards Daniel.
Yeah, because God had made that change in his heart, but he wants to protect himself. He needs to protect himself. He expresses the wide held idea that if you are vegetarian, that you will be pale and sickly and weak.
I heard that a lot.
Yeah.
People know.
So he basically said he doesn't give a definite answer. And you know what Daniel could have said? Well, I tried. And I mean, there's no answer. But he doesn't stop there. Verse number 11. Christina?
Oh, me.
I skipped myself.
But Daniel said to the overseer, who the commander of the officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Michael, and Isaiah.
I think, for now it's enough. So he talked to the chief of eunuchs, and then now he goes to whom?
The steward.
His friends?
To another official, a lower ranking official, whom the chief of eunuchs placed to be directly responsible for these guys, right? So you see, he was not able to solve it on this level. He goes to another. He doesn't stop. He tries to find solutions, and he now offers an idea. Verse 12.
Please test your servants for 10 days and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink.
Then number 13 also.
И потом пусть явятся перед тобой лица наши и лица те, отроков, которые питаются царской пищей, и затем поступай с рабами твоими, как предвидишь.
And 14.
So the warden agreed their proposal and tested them for 10 days.
Just 10 days.
And what were the results? Well, first of all, why Daniel was so sure? He didn't say, give us a month, right?
He knew God was on his side.
First of all, he knew God was on his side, because the only thing that he tried to do was to stay faithful to God. And also 10 is the minimum. It's the smallest letter in Hebrew alphabet. It's the Yota, Yud. So it's believed that it's the minimum amount of time that anything could actually develop and occur. So and we should presume, I believe, that he knew something about the benefits of vegetarian diet as well.
He had education.
Because to offer this and to believe that he won't starve and he won't be weak, and so he should have had some experience of that kind. And what was the result? Verses 15 and 16.
At the end of 10 days, their faces appeared fair, and they were fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate of the king's dainty.
Тогда ангел-царь брал их кушанье и вино для питья и давал им овощи.
So just in 10 days, they physically looked better. And comparing to whom?
To the other guys.
So now the time has come to talk about the other guys. Who were the other guys?
Same Jewish guys.
Yes. Because there are no other guys in this chapter. From the first verse to the end of the chapter, the description is about the Judeans, about people who were taken as Daniel was from the king and princess lineage, who came together as a group, and the story follows these boys. So, and it is a tragedy that only 4 people, out of the whole group, and there should be many of them, there should have been many of them, because remember the order to bring all those people who would meet these criteria. So it was a good number of those young people. Only 4 stood up. And now it is very interesting to ask the question, how did Daniel and the three other guys became friends with each other? It's, many people naturally assume that they were friends when they came, that they were already friends when they came to Babylon. But there is no statement that would be able to prove that. Because you see, Daniel, let's try to look at this in this way. When is the first time that these three other persons did the his names? Their names are, remembering, because Abednego including Michael, Anani, Azariah. When are they mentioned as friends with Daniel? It's only at chapter 2, in chapter 2, verse 17.
Well, chapter 1.
No.
Like as
Where?
friends, right?
Like Daniel, and then.
Well,
actually
they are not mentioned here as friends.
Yep.
So it's verse 6, chapter 1. As it turned out, among these young men were some from Judah. So Daniel, so they just mentioned that they were there.
There, yeah, but they're all friends, yeah.
Ну и с одного колена написано были, да?
No. From Judah, yeah. They were from same, from Judah.
No, what's like
Judah is a
Well,
country.
Judah was.
That's
Judea, meaning Judea.
same thing as like when I went to school and I don't speak English and I have to be friends with all these like Ukrainians and Russians who can speak to me, like that's who you end up being friends with, even like if so that same thing I feel like here, because I had same interests, obviously they were all faithful. That was the main common denominator.
It's not really. Because
Why
we're all of them are Jewish, right? All the guys are Jewish. But like those four were like pretty much from like one, like I don't know, like let's make it this way, like all Bokos, for example, right? Like, как бы сыны как бы Джуды, то есть их же было 12 человек, правильно? Они все были евреи. Только с одного колена они были.
Where are you taking it from?
Yeah, from Judah.
From Judah.
Okay, let's
Judah is okay. So
it's
there's
a brief history. Let's do a brief history of the people of Israel, right? So initially there were 12 tribes, and then the 13th tribe was the Levites, right? Then it was one kingdom, and then in the year 722 BC, the Assyrian captivity happened, and the 10 northern tribes were led into Assyrian captivity, and they assimilated, they vanished there. So only 3 tribes left: Judah, Benjamin, and Levites. And Judah at that time was a description of the southern kingdom. So it's the whole kingdom.
It's not like a family.
So and of course, if you go back to history, Judah was one person. Then a tribe of Judah was a little bit more than one person. But then in the 5th century BC, in the 6th century BC, it's a country. It's a huge country. Yeah.
No, but I still see what you're saying. Like they were all Jewish. They were all brought from the same area. But in that case, for me, language was the thing that brought me together. In their situation, was their religion, their faith.
But you see, others guys could be from Judah too. The
No,
rest
they
who
probably
didn't.
were. I'm saying in this case it was religion, because
Yeah.
those all stepped away and all of them stuck together. I mean, that's another thing. If I meet Adventists at my school, I would probably be easier for me to become friends with them versus other people.
But you see, in this chapter there are no other nations. So this chapter and all the boys described are all Jewish, only Jewish. So the rest of them are not from different. They are not Pentecostals or Baptists or Catholics or Lutherans. They're all Adventists, right? If you want to use this terminology, so they have the same ethnic background, language background and religious background. But out of all those who were supposed to be God's servants and God's representatives, only 4 stood out. And now I want to bring you back to the question: when did they become friends?
I guess if you would bring the same situation as right now, so if those guys gave in to some principles that they had, so for example, they offered them on the Saturday to go somewhere and eat, for example, buy food restaurant, and those 4 guys decided to stay out, and they just stayed there, and then they met each other at the time and then decision.
If you follow the logic of the story, I believe they became friends because they all individually stood firm to God's principles. All the rest begin to eat, to drink and so forth. But these 4, they decided to stay firm. So now we come to the very profound issue of choosing your friends. Choosing your friends. It's not a secret that people influence each other.
Скажи мне, кто твой друг, я тебе скажу, кто ты.
Yep. Яблоко от яблони. This is about something a little bit different. But the Bible says that худые сообщества развращают добрые нравы. How is it in English? Bad company spoils good morals or something like that. Or moral principles or something like that. So their decision to hang out together as a group and becoming friends versus associating themselves with other Jewish boys that did not stay true to God was a major factor. I hear stories upon stories about young people choosing, wrong friends, wrong company, and then becoming something, totally different. Having good friends that could uplift you and support you in your walk with God is tremendously important, and especially when you are a teenager or a young person. When you are past that age, when you have been formed, as a person in terms of your values and so forth, it's not that important. I mean, to me, I have my wife, I have my kids. I mean, it's plenty. But when you are young, it is crucially, it's vitally important to have your friends, and when they are influencing you towards breaking God's commandments and so forth, it's a very dangerous situation.
Bad company corrupts good morals.
Oh, thank you. And the Bible says in Proverbs 14 verse 4, Proverbs 14 verse 7. Let me read it quickly. Verse 7. It says, "Go from the presence of a foolish man." Let's read something other than King James Version. "Leave the presence of a fool, for there you do not meet words of knowledge." No, I don't like it.
Leave the presence of foolish person, or you will not understand the wise concept.
Well, King James Version is better than. It says, "Go from the presence of a foolish man when thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge." So when you see that he is not,
he doesn't have knowledge.
Yeah, then leave his presence. Just don't associate with it. And I'm not talking about being, antisocial, living in your cave,
or right away when you heard like something foolish from him, like just leave right away. Just do not come and then spend time again and again.
We are to be Jesus. It's in the Gospel of John, chapter 17. It says, I don't pray that you would take them out of the world, but when you are in the world, just remember that you are not of the world. So I think we're talking about close relationships. If and friends in a Russian sense of the word, because in English sense of the word, I just made a new friend, yeah, and meaning that it's an acquaintance. I just learned his or her name, and so you have a friend all of a sudden. Russian term drug means a close one, yeah, a friend whom you're close with. Anybody wants to talk about this factor, maybe from your experience or people you know or heard of?
Huge factor.
Anybody from this side of the room? Tell us. Okay, from this preference. Okay.
Well,
There you
go. No, but just like even in like my college, I meet new people and stuff, and it's like it's not that like they're bad people and stuff, but you can feel how like you kind of want to please them, you kind of want to like talk the way they do or something, and like sometimes they like talk bad about things or something, and you kind of it's not good and stuff, and like it really influences you. So you really have to stay strong and think like yeah, I should pay attention to like how I speak, and it's hard. I mean, like, because you want to be friends with other people. Like, let's say they're not religion, they don't know any better, kind of thing. But it's hard to try to make sure that like you catch yourself. You have to catch yourself a lot.
So it's hard to be the positive influence that we want to be towards others in their life. But when you're in a crowd setting, it's really easy to fall back on reverse, where you get influenced by others instead of you influencing others.
I think it's good to look at those stories and then understand that he's like we talked about Joseph, and then we talked about Noah, and then Daniel. That their lives were not changed at the time when they made a decision. And then nothing really good was happening when they actually made a decision. They struggled a lot, and then Noah was struggling for 120 years. Joseph was struggling for lots of years in prison.
13 years.
And then 13 years in prison.
The total time between 17 and 30 when he became the prime minister.
And then Daniel was struggling a lot more than this episode. And then he had like the lions and stuff, a lot more in his life. So, and then I heard the story in Auburn camp meeting that when the person was talking how the pastor decided to go to the mission, and then he lived by the tribe that didn't accept them, and then he kind of got disappointed. His wife died when the child was born, and then after he actually was disappointed with God, and then he stopped living Christian life, and then he realized later on that after lots of years the whole tribe got converted because his wife was talking to the boy who was bringing food. So it's just good to learn those stories and understand how it's hard during the period of making decisions and stuff, but then later on it will have a probably huge effect on other people and you.
Thank you. Do you notice that Noah, Joseph, and Daniel, they were the minority? So each time when God's faithful people are described, they are a minority. Sometimes it's only one person, right? Versus the whole system, versus the whole country, the whole religion and establishment and science and so forth. And this is one of the lessons that's continuously brought out from the biblical narrative. To be firm, you oftentimes have to find yourself in a very insignificant company in terms of numbers, right? It's not easy, right? It's not easy. But let's look at the results. A couple of last verses and we are done. So what's the verse that we are reading?
17.
Okay, let's go on.
As for these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams.
Thank you.
Oh. When the time appointed by the king arrived, the overseer of the court officials brought them unto Nebuchadnezzar's presence.
19.
And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king.
And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom.
Thank you.
And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus.
Not only the 4 guys became better in terms of knowledge and understanding, better than their peers, other Jewish guys. They became better than all the wise men and science men of the country.
Over the entire.
That's amazing, and that's called God's blessing. You know what is blessing? Let me give you an illustration. Have you ever driven a car without powered steering wheel?
You know, it's a workout.
Yeah, to turn you really have to apply a lot of effort.
And lots of semi trucks back there were without steering. So
That's what they had that now.
They had like a huge muscles.
So this is life without God's blessing. You do it on your own. I mean, it just mechanics, right? Mechanics. It's the cause and effect situation. You know, the more force you apply, the more result you get. But there is a limit to human capabilities, to your memory, to your brain function, ability to learn. You hit the wall in terms of how much more you can do. But God's blessing is like having the
extra memory,
extra power steering.
Power steering. Yeah. You use one finger and it's amazing. So you still apply effort.
Not that much though.
But God takes and multiplies your effort. So blessing is not something that God does instead of us. It's God multiplying the effects of what we do. So you could learn English language in 6 months and be quite fluent. You could learn science, the whole book. Like I sometimes what I did when I was studying, I could share many stories about studying during the Soviet era and being a believer. But I would during the summer I had a habit of studying the book. Like they give you out the books for the summer break. Mm-hmm. And I would take a book and I would study ahead of time, and then just be happy the whole year. The whole following year, because I knew it all. So I know that it's a very real situation when you trust God, when you try to be obedient, you pray to God. God's blessing is very real. You could accomplish magnificent things, and the example of Daniel and his friends is another testimony to that. So you could be the best, psychologists, then biologists, and whoever, builders, computer guys, and so forth, and gals. And the people will envy you.
The interesting thing about those, the rest of the guys, they had to actually, when those guys ate vegetables and water, and then for 10 days, then those officials made the rest of the guys eat vegetables and drink water.
You think so?
That's what it says.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Okay, I'll find it for you right now.
And at the end of 10 days, then the Nasir took away their portions of delicacies and wine that they were doing and gave them vegetables. I think he was talking to
Daniel.
some guys, yeah. To Daniel and
No, not everybody else.
So you of course you were not brought as slaves to this country, to this Babylon, right? But in many aspects it is similar. You are immigrants, especially those who were brought here being already teenagers or young people. You could be very successful, and you will be very successful in this country when following the same principles that Daniel and his friends did. So the way to greatness, to success in life, is being faithful in anything, anything that it takes. I'm sure that after those 10 days, they were able to find other foods in addition to beans and nuts and grass, because they proved that they could survive on a different diet. So that was the whole point, and they would be better off, as a result. But the whole principle is being faithful to God, and God begins to act and to bless you. And this is something that you cannot do on your own. But when there is God's blessing, great results happen.